Welcome to 30 Minutes of Faith. We're very happy to have Genevieve Shiroma with us today from the Board of Directors at SMUD. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you. Will you tell us where you were born and raised and grew up and went to high school and all those things that the viewers might know more about your background?
Sure. Thank you, John. Well, first of all, I'm really pleased and honored to have this conversation with you and to be a part of 30 Minutes of Faith. So I grew up not too far away from here. I was born and raised in the Lodi, California area. It's in San Joaquin County. I grew up in a little community called Acampo, 3 miles north of Lodi. Middle of the Great Vineyards is how we, from Acampo, describe our community. And I went to a little elementary school there called Houston Elementary. The community was made up of a diverse group of people, not only diverse in ethnicity, but diverse in backgrounds. Some of us were farm worker kids. My dad was a farm worker. My mother also for a time. There were kids whose parents were the farmers. There were kids whose parents were civil servants, worked for the post office, worked for the city and county. Some folks who were union organizers. And all in all, we had a good life there. Growing up, as I say, in the middle of the Great Vineyards, there's something about being connected with the soil, with agriculture that really stays with you, has stayed with me to this day. Went to Lodi High School, the class of 1972. Then went to community college in Stockton, San Joaquin Delta. And through a very good scholarship, the Cal Grant of its day, was able to transfer to UC Davis and get an engineering degree. Dial forward several decades later, I had an opportunity to run for the SMUD board. I grabbed that opportunity as a way to serve the community and have now had the privilege of serving on that SMUD board for 16 years.
And have done so with distinction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have siblings?
I do. There were 4 of us. I say there were 4 of us because we lost my very dear middle sister, Amy, a few years ago to a post-surgery stroke. And I'll come back to that because that really affected all of us, affected me. And I'll tell you, faith really got us through that. My mother and father, farm worker parents. My mother raised 4 of us substantially by herself. My father, who is still with us today, would be the first to say that as a farm worker family, there are a lot of challenges, whether it is elements of poverty, being a family of color. There can be the dealing with racism. My parents were born and raised in the Hawaiian Islands, moved to California after World War II in the late 1950s. Even in the aftermath of 120,000 Japanese Americans being taken to camp, their constitutional rights violated, and yet my parents felt that California would provide opportunities in a new, era of civic discourse and a big land, a big land of the mainland. My father would be the first to say that he drank too much, he gambled too much, and my mother had to make the tough decision to separate from him for quite a long time. And so she raised us. We spent time on welfare, but even out of that, the community helped us. We were given opportunities, and substantially through my mother's faith, we thrived.
As a child, did you feel the racism and biases and prejudices, poverty, all of those things that may or may not have gone? Did you feel those, or were you just going along as a kid?
Both. As a kid, there also growing up in the country and growing up around agriculture, there is a sense of freedom too, where we kids could roam for miles on our bicycles. We knew where The dogs were running loose at rich farms, and to just zoom by those farms with our legs up, so the dogs barking, and that freedom and sense of the land really was something that strengthened me and the other kids that I grew up with. While also, yes, whether it's the remarks by folks, whether it was deliberate or not, the seeing the disparity in terms of the kids who have things, the kids who don't. I certainly felt it as a child, but I also felt that there were people in the community who cared, who had compassion, who looked to give kids like me a chance and a leg up. And through that, it really is why I'm here today. Also, John, during that time, growing up as a child, my mother described herself as a baptized Mormon, not practicing, and in fact did not practice for the rest of her life, yet she had a very strong sense of faith. And as we were growing up there in a campo, she felt that we kids ultimately would choose which path we would take, but meanwhile, she wanted to give us an opportunity to go to Sunday school. So there was a church in California, or in Lodi, that had a school bus that would go into the countryside and pick us kids up to go to Sunday school. So for many a year, my siblings and I would wait for this little school bus to come by our lane, hop on the bus, go into town, and go to Sunday school. In those years of going to Sunday school, I think it gave me a very strong sense of community, of the goodness of people, of faith, however you feel it, because again, there are many choices people have and paths people take. I would never sit here and say which one is the right one, but rather that there is something that connects us all, and whether you call it a higher power or God or what have you, I do know that for us growing up poor with adversity, that sense of faith was something that we could go to for strength and great comfort.
So you learned to pray and learned to sing the sacred songs or
Yes.
hymns and
Yes.
all of those sorts of things. When you were talking about living in the big country,
Yeah.
when I was a child growing up in a little tiny area on a farm, if we were going to get on our bikes and go somewhere, we had to say to our parents where we were going and what time we'd be back.
Uh-huh.
And my dad would say, that way, if you're not back at 5:30, I know you will have run into trouble and I'll come and find you.
Yeah.
And I learned that very early, and we'd say to our children when our kids were little, don't get out in front of us so far that we can't rescue you, can't get to you.
Exactly.
So a lot of those little things that were just farm stuff,
Yes.
being able to roam the country and go chase the lizards and the snakes and everything else were very, very important to us. I'm a little, I guess I shouldn't be, but I'm a little surprised to hear you say your degree's in engineering. What led you that way?
Okay, yes. Well, it was a journey because, growing up you think, well, what do you want to be?
Sure.
And in the early years, I thought, well, maybe I'll be a teacher because I admired my teachers. Then going into community college, oh, I loved the chemistry and the biology and the science and the math. I also loved history, loved art. It was sort of, there were all these things at my doorstep that were interesting. But meanwhile, as you get older, you have to make some choices. So as I was poised to transfer to UC Davis, I had friends who were going to become doctors. They were pre-med. And I thought, well, why not that? So I chose bacteriology as my degree, and I got
I'd
to...
have never chosen that.
Yes, I thought, well, this is something, intriguing, different. Maybe it's a challenge. And in fact, it was a challenge. In my first year at UC Davis, I was taking all these classes on genetics and biochemistry and what have you. Found myself to be a pretty unhappy student, and it was reflected in my grades. So I had a moment of sitting there with my my two sisters. My brother was off, I think at that point in the Navy, and I was almost kind of having a crisis of what am I going to do? You know, the path that I thought I was on has not come to fruition. And my little sister said, Genevieve, you know, it's not the end of the world. Okay? Just take some time to think it through. Perspective is always important. So I did one of these little analytical things with myself. What do I like? What am I good at? How can I translate that into a career? Because one must take care of oneself. Well, I like the math and the what they call the hard sciences. And I thought, well, I want this to be a practical thing too. I'm going to try one engineering class. So in that next quarter, I did take a materials science class, which is the engineering of materials. Loved it. Ended up changing my major in my senior year. Ended up tacking on 2 more years. Took 6 years to get my degree. Very, very happy, no regrets in doing that. Along the way, environmentalism was becoming much more at the forefront, and Jerry Brown 1.0 came to the campus, talked about come work for the state of California, come work for one of the environmental agencies. Next thing I know, I'm working as a student at the Air Resources Board, and then turned that into a 21-year career working on reducing air pollution through the state of California Air Resources Board.
Never looked back.
Did not look back.
That's a fun story. Now, tell us about your husband and family, and when did that all come to be?
My husband and I actually are celebrating our 35th wedding anniversary.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. I have a stepson who I help raise. We have also a beautiful and wonderful granddaughter.
Aren't grandchildren wonderful?
Oh, gosh. Oh, I tell you, anybody who is poised to become a grandparent, you are so lucky.
I agree.
So that's my immediate family. We are very close-knit. My husband is my champion, and he is retired. He retired as a software analyst. As I have thrown my hat in the ring and run for office, he has supported me absolutely, and he believes in the public good. For me, the major path that I chose for my life is public service. I have my youngest sister who chose a path of becoming a missionary, and missionary educator, and she and her husband spent 13 years in Kiev, actually. That sister, just to diverge for a moment from me, that sister, Bonnie, she is truly inspirational. She is a 15-year breast cancer survivor, the last 8 years at stage 4. And she and her husband came back from Kiev when her cancer, in fact, did spread. And that was 8 years ago. And she was given 2 to 3 years. Well, it's been 8 years. And she has just been an amazing individual. Her grace, her strength, her faith have, I think, made all the difference. Now, my path has been public service, whether it's the electric utility. I'm also a board member on our local United Way. And through these types of organizations, there is so much good that can be done. John, you and I were talking earlier about SMUD's relationship with the Interfaith Council, and I'm very pleased about that because it reflects SMUD's embracement of diversity, SMUD's embracement of the key thing is that we are all connected through wires, poles, lines, so forth. But meanwhile, as your electric utility, we want to assure that everyone has a place at the table, that everyone has access to good information, that we, the electric utility, are doing right by you in terms of looking out for you, making sure that you can be very pleased with the service, that we are being green, that we are being compassionate, that we are always understanding that what we do affects real people's pocketbooks and real people's quality of life.
It's an important part of what we do in this region. SMUD
Yes.
plays a big role.
Yes.
My wife is a breast cancer survivor in her 5th year, and that's been an interesting journey for us.
Oh, yes.
It's something that you never plan on when you're young, and
No.
it's quite a change of life. Now, what made you decide you would run for the SMUD board? I mean, was there some aha moment that I'm going to do this, and how did that come about?
It was more that as you are on your journey through life, sometimes opportunities cross your path, and do you take it? Or do you recognize it? And so some years prior to running for the SMUD board, I had run for the city council, and I ran for the city council as a means to take my community activism to a much higher level. I had been a neighborhood association member. I had worked on there. I live in Curtis Park. There's a rail yard there. Boy, it has been cleaned up of toxics. I was part of the neighborhood group that really pushed to make sure that it was being cleaned up properly, that it could be developed to become part of the neighborhood, and that is actually happening. I failed at that city council effort. But I didn't go away from that thinking, you know what, I'm never going to do it again. But rather I figured, there is, while it was a very disappointing experience, I didn't walk away. I felt, there may be something else out there for me. A new door will open. So I was gardening in my flower garden. I wasn't doing vegetables in my flower garden. I got a phone call from a friend who said, Genevieve, your representative on the SMUD board is not going to run. There's going to be a vacancy. So I said, are you running? Are you calling me to tell me you're running and you want my support? He goes, no, Genevieve, no, you should run. He says, look, at your work at the Air Resources Board, you worked on power plants. Okay? You have been a volunteer in the community. That's a perfect combination for running for the SMUD board. It's a public utility. You could use your work experience, you could use your community experience. You run. And I had 3 days to decide, okay, because the deadline was looming. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to talk to some folks. I'm going to go for it. And it presented another opportunity to serve the community. And my view on that, for me personally, goes back to those days in the Campo when folks in the community didn't give up on us. They helped us. They didn't have to, but they did. And there's the classic view of, well, you give back. Serving on something like the SMUD board is such a way to do that, because since we are in all segments of the community, we have an opportunity to pay attention and to really work at helping people through the quality of life of light and power, and making sure that it is something reliable and affordable.
When I was young and in the military, and only a few months to go before my discharge, the chaplain of the Air Force came to talk to the chaplains and the people who assisted them, and that was me, the youngsters. And he was a 3-star general, and he had been around the block a couple of times, and he'd been to war, and he had gotten a pretty good look at life. And he said when he talked to this group, the next time you see God, one of the things he's going to ask you is, what have you done for the community? And there were other things he said that were important to me, but that one rang my bell and said, you can't just hide and work in your garden and not do anything else, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that one rang my bell, and I've heard it ring many times since. I wish more people, we sort of think the people that are getting involved as activists are radicals, but
Sure.
most of them aren't. Most of them are just active in a cause that leaves the world a better place, better society.
Absolutely. I think that there are many, many people within the region who care, and they may not be flashy about it. They may not be at the forefront of an organization, but they are truly making a difference. I see this oftentimes in the charitable campaign that SMUD runs. Every year, they work not only with the United Way, but with other organizations, and sometimes it's an individual nonprofit. I mean, anything from whether it's Habitat for Humanity or Women Escaping a Violent Environment or Happy Tales, what have you, or an individual's church. Okay? Every year, SMUD runs a campaign for the employees. There are 2,000 plus employees. And every year, these employees raise, this last year, I think they raised over $300,000 for charities in the community. And these are folks who are going about their day, doing their work, whether it's in the call center or the line crews or the people who are working on the hydroelectric system, who are donating their hard-earned money to help others. And then also, SMUD has an option, on the bill that if you want to give a dollar or so to a fund that helps those who are having a hard time paying their electricity bill. That fund has also raised thousands of dollars to help people who need a little extra hand to pay their electricity bill. And it just tells me that within our community, there are many thousands of people who do care and find a way to help, whether it's $1 a month or whether it's volunteering for an organization.
In the Wall Street Journal yesterday was an article from a national research firm that said the richer the country, the less charity is given, with the exception of the United States. It said the United States has proved that the wealthier you are, the more you give, and that the amount of money given to charity in the United States is phenomenal. But one of the things that caught my eye is that it said 54% of all of the people surveyed in the United States claimed they were religious and believed that religion was an important part of their life in the city and the county and the state. So do we think we live in a religious area here in Sacramento?
I'm not sure that I can say that we live in a religious area, but I do think that in the greater Sacramento region and the six-county region, that there is a strong element of faith. And I think that is represented by the sheer diversity of the Interfaith Council and the membership within the Interfaith Council. And also, you had shared with me earlier that there are, did you say 1,700? 1,700 religious organizations within the area. And I also see leaders of faith stepping forward during times of need in a very compassionate manner, and also when there are times of strife, towards speaking of understanding, of working together. So I have a sense that there is a very strong sense of faith within our greater Sacramento area. I'm sure you know more keenly, being a minister yourself, but that's my overall perception.
Well, and religion comes in a broad brush. It can
Yes,
be
it
all the
does.
way from I want to meditate for 45 minutes before I go to bed, to saying your prayers, to going to an evening mass, to there's 100 different ways to do this, and the Sabbath day is recognized Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in the world, and of course in our country, and so our weekends, I think, would find a lot of people in church.
Yeah.
And you could be in a lot worse places than to be in church.
Absolutely, yes.
Do you think America's doing okay?
I think that having traveled, my husband and I have been very privileged to travel to many countries, and when one does that, you appreciate the culture and the people of another country, and the importance of international relations, but it also gives you an appreciation for good old USA. Do we have troubles? Yes. Do we have times of crisis? Yes. But it seems to me each time America tries to do better. And in the timing of this interview, we are coming off of the 50th anniversary of the Selma March. Do we need to do more? Yes. Do we have the strength of that foundation there for us to help us see the way, to see how to do better? Yes. Plus, I just have so much faith in the American people. There is so much good, so much compassion that I think that we will prevail.
We sort of only hear about the bad. And
Yes.
We don't get to hear the good.
There's so much good.
Now we're coming to a close. This time goes by just quicker than all get out.
It does.
So if you can wave a magic wand to fix or repair or replace something in our society, what would that be?
Well, I think about this saying that's attributed to Jimi Hendrix, and I don't have it exactly memorized, but it goes along something like this: that when the love of power is replaced by the power of love, we will have peace. And I think that if we could have peace in the world, we would be in such a much better place.
Love one another.
Yes, love one another.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
It's been nice to visit with you.
Thank you, John, so much.